If someone's truly dedicated and wants to be a leader, a manager, they will find the means to become a better manager. They'll think, they'll read, they'll go to seminars, they'll connect with people like yourself. But I find it that if they were never really interested and you kind of force them into it and they like you, so they did it, they'll always have that over you. And they'll say, well, you remember, I really didn't ask for this. So holding them accountable to being a great leader is nearly impossible. And I learned that the hard way. And I tell everybody, don't do it. Don't force it. Really have people scream out the fact that they want to be leaders.
Have you ever seen someone in a leadership position that gives you that feeling that they really don't want to be leading? Avetis sits down with Jeff Tan, an official member of the Forbes Technology Council, former Chief Information Officer of Goodwill Industries, and a tech leader with over 30 years in the technology space, to discuss strategies to be a better leader for your company as well as your family. Let's dive in.
Good morning and good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to another episode of the Tech Leaders Playbook. Today, I'm extremely excited to welcome a great guest, Jeff Tan. Jeff, welcome aboard. Welcome to my show.
Great to be here. Looking forward to the conversation.
Glad to have you. Jeff, you and I had a great conversation probably about a month ago, and we hit it off about leadership concepts and tech and where it's headed. And so we wanted to continue this conversation. First of all, guys, everyone needs to know Jeff's background. Jeff is the founder, speaker, author. He's a founder of a company called Ton Enterprises, which is his company where they focus on leadership. So, Jeff, tell us a little bit about your story. Where did you get started and what's led you to this point in your career?
Well, I started off in tech. In fact, most of my career was in tech. I started life in tech as a programmer. We would call those developers today or software engineers, but we were called programmers back in the day. And I was a long-haired hippie COBOL programmer.
Nice. COBOL. You definitely aged yourself
there.
Oh,
yeah.
80s?
Yeah, the 80s and 90s. I rocked COBOL. It was awesome. That's always my fallback plan, right? Is if the current gig doesn't work out, I can always go back and code COBOL.
Oh yeah.
But I like to joke and say I got drugged kicking and screaming into management at some point in my career. I did not want to do that. I didn't want to play the political games. And finally I said yes. I had a couple of good friends that kind of kicked me in the butt and said, you need to do this. You'd be good at it. So I made the transition from individual contributor to manager and leader, worked my way up in a global company of about 56,000 people, worked my way up to the director role in IT, really wanted to become a CIO. I wanted that opportunity to have control of a department and do it my way, do it what I considered the right way, right? So I left that organization to become CIO for a commercial real estate developer that was just skyrocketing at the time. We built an amazing team of individuals. And then 2008, 2009 real estate crash came and we disassembled the team. I joined a nonprofit as their CIO. Goodwill Industries here in central Indiana, was their CIO for a number of years. Just had a great partnership with the vice president of retail, and we did digital transformation before it was called digital transformation. And I really felt at that point that I wanted to join a tech company, so I moved to the dark side and became a vendor. Did that for a number of years. We sold our company and I stayed with that company, the acquiring company, for a couple of years, and then wanted to go out on my own. I really wanted to focus on leadership development. I'd written a book, Amplify Your Value, about leading IT, and we're starting to do speaking engagements related to that. So ended up at the beginning of the pandemic talking with our board about taking a package and riding off and doing my own thing, which is Ton Enterprises. I was real original with that name, right? Couldn't come up with much better. So I've been doing that now about 3.5 years, and it includes several key clients that I work with, and just having a great time, really focused on changing the face of IT, building that next generation of leader. I think that the skills that generally get us to the top of the technology food chain, if you will, are basically our technical chops. And I think what's really needed in business today are more of our soft skills. And so we
Agreed.
focus on building those soft skills in the leaders of tomorrow.
Hey Jeff, what's the key difference between a CIO and a CTO for some of our listeners? Some organizations have both, which is rare. Some
Mhm.
only have one and the other. What do you see as the key difference between the two?
I think the key difference, especially with organizations that have both, is CIO is more internally focused on the internal systems of the organization. The CTO is focused more on the technology that faces the customer. Whether it's consumer facing or B2B, doesn't matter, but they have that focus. And I think to me, that's the biggest difference.
Do you find that they could be equally technical, or do you see the CTOs being more technical and the CIOs being more business oriented, more IT infrastructure oriented, or does it just depend on the individual?
I think a lot depends on the individual, but I think what happens is the CIO ends up almost becoming the chief infrastructure officer, right? They're
Hmm.
focused more that way. I think that's diminishing the role a little bit. In fact, on my podcast, Status Go, we just did an episode called "The CIO is Dead: Long Live the CIO." And it's about the proliferation of CXO titles. You got CIO, CTO, CDO, CDXO, right? And I think that's a symptom of maybe the CIO is not doing the things that their organization really needs them to do.
Interesting.
Or the organization is so large, one person can't do it all.
Correct. How did it feel being a CIO at a nonprofit? I learned a lot about a nonprofit from one of the CEOs of the Boys and Girls Club. I didn't realize what a
Oh, yeah.
business it was. What did it feel like? What was the key difference between working there and a product company? And what did what's the kind of a misnomer or something that a
Yeah.
misunderstanding about these type of organizations?
Well, I think it depends on the size of organization, but to me, the biggest difference is people are there for the mission. That's why you join the organization. You believe in the mission, and even if you're not directly attached to the mission, like maybe you're a help desk person in IT, you still are there because you love and believe in the mission. Where some of the differences come in, it really comes in on the size of the nonprofit. Something like the Boys and Girls Club is a little bit bigger than a lot of nonprofits, where maybe budgets are incredibly tight. What you deal with a lot in the nonprofit space is every dollar not spent on the mission is a dollar not spent on the mission. And so you're trying to uh, influence and get funding for IT projects, and you have to always tie it back is what's going to be the impact on the mission, because if you don't make that tie back, you're not going to get the funding very easily.
And it's truly mission driven the way you hear them talking about it.
Absolutely,
That's
absolutely.
great
You
to
talk,
hear.
and I think our for-profit companies could take a lesson from the nonprofit playbook and talk more about what is their vision, what is their mission, so that you get people behind that vision and mission, and keep it on the forefront. Too often we get lost in the P&L and the balance sheet and cash flow, which are all important, but I think we lose sight of what's our vision, what are we trying to do,
Absolutely.
and why do people get on the bus to join us in that vision.
I agree, Jeff. And in fact, even if you and I care about the bottom line and the profits and EBITDA and all this, technically your employees don't care.
Yeah,
Right.
yeah,
And I don't
right.
blame them for not caring about my EBITDA, right? It doesn't mean anything to them. What ties into people want to kind of hitch their wagon on a great mission where they can help someone, help people,
Yes.
and help themselves. So I think you're
Yeah,
right. We
yeah,
need to create a vision. We need to create a mission that people can stand by. Otherwise, they won't care.
right. Absolutely.
Jeff, what you mentioned something really interesting. In the 80s, you were a programmer. That was your love. And they
Yes.
kicking and screaming, they got you into leadership.
Yes.
Over the last 20 years, I've seen a shift, and I'm sure you have as well, where companies have created two different career tracks. You've got the technical
Yes.
career track, and you've got the managerial career track. And a lot of folks just stay technical. And
Absolutely.
companies have created opportunities where someone could get the type of respect that you would get with leadership, and potentially the income that would come with leadership without the headaches.
Yeah. Yeah.
So what's your thoughts on that? Is that something that creates a huge bottleneck for companies? Meaning, why would anyone ever want to get into leadership, right, and stay in leadership? And two, is it a good idea?
Yeah. Well, even back in my day when I made that decision, it was probably the mid 90s, I guess, that I made that decision to go into management. You have two tracks. You stay individual contributor, stay technical, or you start managing people. And it's not for everybody. I think companies that have now built two separate career tracks, I still believe for the most part, compensation wise, if you go into management, go into leadership, you've got a higher upper end
Yes.
than you do if you stay in as an individual contributor. That was one of the things that attracted me to the roles. But I think you have to think of it more as you're leading people, you're helping people grow, you're helping them succeed. And what I learned very quickly as I made that transition is I used to get such a thrill out of talking with someone about a problem they were experiencing and solving it with code. To me, that rush was just incredible, right? And what I learned was when I moved into leadership, when I moved into management, helping someone grow in their career and succeed in their career was even a bigger rush to me. I really enjoyed helping people meet their potential. In fact, I used to tell when I was in that CIO role at those couple of organizations, I used to tell my team all the time, the proudest day in my career will be when you come into my office to resign because you're going down the street to be CIO.
Wow.
That means I did my job. I got you ready. I look around the Indianapolis community where I'm from, and I can point to different companies and say, that CIO is someone that I used to work with. That CIO is someone I used to work with. And it's a source of pride, but it's also a source of accomplishment, right? That I
Absolutely.
was
It's like
doing.
it's your tree. It's your
Yeah,
tree
yeah,
of coaches you've developed.
yeah,
I don't know if you're a sports fan, but
I am.
Greg Popovich of the Spurs,
Yes,
his assistants have become some of the best coaches in the NBA, and I think that's something that's huge on his legacy and will be forever.
absolutely. Absolutely.
Very good, Jeff. Once people do get into leadership, what advice would you give leaders who are struggling with managing technology and people effectively? Because those are two completely different things.
Yeah. It's difficult because when you start managing technology resources, people that are the individual contributors, you need their respect, and so you have to stay in touch with the technical sides of the job enough that you have the respect of those that are working together with you, because otherwise they won't follow you,
Yes.
especially when you're that new manager or maybe you're one level up. It's just so hard because they'll just start talking circles around you if you don't understand the technology. I remember my first CIO role. I grew up on the app side, as I said. I was software development, so these servers and this infrastructure was and networking was, oh my God, it was foreign territory for me. So I got this first job, and I can remember meeting with one of our vendors probably in the first or second week that I was there. And after the meeting, one of the guys, Jeff Pearson, pulled me aside and he said, "Jeff, I see that you don't get it. You're not there." He says, "I want to help you." So he came over to our office every Friday afternoon for, I don't know, 4 or 5 months. and he would whiteboard out networking and infrastructure, and he basically taught me
Amazing.
enough to get by, right? I mean, you still wouldn't want me configuring your router, but I at least could talk the lingo with the team and understand and help make decisions because of that. So you need somebody like that. So I would say the advice is understand where your gaps are and continue to try to fill them, but don't lose sight of the fact that you're now in leadership and you need to continue to develop that. I find a lot of people when they get into those roles, they might have been in a management program as they're trying to work their way up, and then they arrive and they stop learning. I think you have to continue to learn, continue to grow, and that includes on the leadership side of things as well.
Very nice. Jeff, one of the things that I think you would agree with is any company that's trying to force a brilliant technologist into a leadership role, and that person does not want to be in a leadership role, stop.
Yes.
I've made this mistake with technical people and non-technical people. These are the individuals that like you said, I do believe that people can learn to be good leaders, right?
Yes. Yes.
Some of it is nature, some of it is nurture. The nurture part, if someone's truly dedicated and wants to be a leader, a manager,
Yes.
they will find the means to become a better manager. They'll think, they'll read, they'll go to seminars, they'll connect with people like yourself. But I find it that if they were never really interested, and you kind of force them into it and they like you, so they did it, they'll always have that over you. And they'll say, well,
Yes.
you remember, I really didn't ask for this.
For this,
So
right,
holding them accountable to being a great leader is nearly impossible. And I learned that
Yes.
the hard way. And I tell everybody, don't do it. Don't force it. Really have people scream out the fact that they want to be leaders through
Yes.
their actions and verbally, because those are the people who will do whatever it takes to become great managers. And sometimes we do this to protect ourselves, right? So we need some people we can't manage 40, 50, 100 individuals, so we put a barrier in between protection.
Yeah.
The challenge is, when that person finally is found out or can't do it anymore, well, you got to go and clean up that mess.
Right.
And it's a
Right.
lot bigger of a mess. And I think the negative impact that we can make on our staff members by giving them a bad manager is so much worse than just trucking through it and being patient and maybe hiring an outsider who does have to ramp up. And it takes time and it's painful, but it's better than forcing someone into a manager role that they're not
totally
ready or
agree.
interested in.
One of the hardest things when you make that transition is to let go of the technical side. I remember when I moved into that role, the application that I spent a good chunk of my career working on was the order system for a large consumer electronics company, and that was my baby. Right, I'd been the lead programmer, the lead support technician, everything on that application. And to let go of that and turn it over to somebody else, they could never do it as well as I could do it. Right. And I think when you force someone to make that step, they end up becoming a micromanager.
Yes.
Because they can't let go of the details. And gosh, Avetis, I have to tell you how to do it. I don't, it's not telling you what to do. It's I got to tell you how, because this is the right way. And I think that's a challenge when you do that.
Massive challenge. And I think I'm big on delegating and elevating. And and you won't do that if your mind is still in the code, right? In whatever individual tasks that you were great at. And I think you miss out on both sides, because when that person becomes a manager, they naturally have to sell less or code less or whatever they were doing in the previous role that they were really good at,
Yeah.
Jeff, let's say we do have a great leader. Let's say we have someone that is a natural leader and wants to be in leadership, but they're not ready. You told me, I think during our conversation, that you have this great leadership program that I think you guys do a big powwow and go off site. Tell me a little bit about that.
Well, this program is leadership development based on the story of Lewis and Clark. It's for leaders, mostly I'd say high potential, established leaders. Someone who's just brand new might not fit with the rest of the group, and I'll talk about that in a minute. But What we do is it's for a client of mine, FCCS Consulting out of Denver. And part of what they do is experiential learning. And the idea is if you have a strong metaphor and you drive these leadership lessons home attached to that story, attached to that metaphor, they make the lessons more real and they make them more actionable. So, for example, they do a program at Gettysburg where they talk about the battlefield and you talk to historians, but you're always bringing it back to how does that apply to business today. So we built this program based on the story of Lewis and Clark, and we bring people out to the Columbia River Gorge for the most part, about 40 miles east of Portland, and beautiful lodge high on a bluff overlooking the Columbia River. And we get people out of their comfort zone, and we talk about the story of Lewis and Clark, but more importantly, vision and what makes a vision powerful. We were talking about that earlier when we were talking about nonprofits and our for-profit cousins could learn from that. What makes a vision powerful? How do you hand a vision off to other people? We talk about team building and how do you create this exceptional team, because Lewis and Clark are successful where others failed because they had an incredible team of people around them. They didn't do it on their own. We talk about overcoming obstacles and how do you plan and prepare for obstacles, both known and unknown, developing resilience in yourself and in others. And how do you proceed on in the face of burnout and distraction? That becomes important as a leader also. So it's a great program, and we've been running it now. We launched in 2021. So we've been running it. This is our third season, and already making big plans for our fourth season next year.
If someone's interested in being part of this, how do they reach out to you, Jeff? So because this sounds great. I even mentioned I may, if I can find the time, potentially do it.
That'd be awesome. We'd love to have you. You can find me on LinkedIn. That's probably the easiest way to connect with me, or my website, jeffreystun.com. FCCSconsulting.com is where you can find their website and register, but I'm happy to point you to that URL for registration if you reach out to me.
Jeff, do any of these lessons resonate for people on a human level and their families? Because too often we're focused on being leaders for our staff, which is wonderful. We forget our families. We neglect that we need to be great leaders for them. Could any of these lessons be learned and applied to the family?
Absolutely. One of the greatest pieces of feedback that we've received from the program. One of the women that took the course last summer wrote in her feedback that this was life-changing, not only for my career, but for my personal life as well. And she didn't specify exactly which piece of it, but when you think about some of the things that we teach in this course, we do talk about what's your vision. And we don't talk about vision and purpose much, our personal life, but we all have one.
Absolutely.
We all have what we want our families to be and how we want our future to unfold. And so being able to articulate that is important. I think where it really comes in is in the module that I mentioned about burnout and distraction, is how to take care of yourself as a leader. And that helps if you're taking care of yourself as a leader at work. That's helping you be prepared to help take care of your family, right? If you're healthy, if you're rested, you're going to be able to better interact and take care of your family. So we talk about rest, realignment, and reorientation as part of this concept, and I think that plays well. Reducing stress is a great way to help your family as well.
It's amazing. Taking micro vacations mentally.
Yeah.
Or actual vacations where you can get away and kind of clear your mind.
And we talk a lot about journaling in this course, throughout the course. Lewis and Clark wrote over 1 million words in their journals over the 3.5 years. And so we teach the participants about journaling and the benefits you get. And that helps you both in your professional life and your personal life as well.
Jeff, thank you for that. That was great. The last 30, 35 years you've been in IT, tech, whatever you want to call it. How have you seen leadership and technology evolving? What have you seen an obvious shift and change?
I tell you, the biggest thing that I have seen is really in the last several years is the realization from others in the business that technology is a part of the business, and almost every company is a technology company at the foundation. And that really came to fruition in the early days of the pandemic, when the IT team really kind of saved the bacon for a lot of organizations, enabling them all of a sudden to work from home. When maybe they didn't adopt that before. I have a friend of mine that's a CIO for a large organization, and he talks about, I went from 40 locations to 4,000 locations overnight.
Wow.
Because they sent everybody home.
Sure.
But what really happened is this newfound appreciation for technology, the consumer-driven aspects of technology that went across the board. What did everybody start doing when we had the shutdown? They started buying online, even your groceries, right? You were shopping online. Well, companies that didn't have an app all of a sudden needed one very quickly. And so you saw this marriage between the mission and vision of the business and the technology to implement it. To me, that's the biggest shift. IT has come out of the back room and into the boardroom.
Absolutely. I've seen that very quick. I've seen that even in the last 16 years. I've only been in the industry for, in tech for 15, 16 years. I've seen massive shifts. And I've seen massive shifts even in markets like LA. I don't know if you know much about the LA market. Everything real tech, was done in the Bay Area. That's changed immensely. LA made its move 10 years ago, and it's a big player. Now you could do it out of Wisconsin. I mean, there's companies popping out of Eastern Europe all day, and they're making, their billion-dollar valuations. I've seen companies out of tiny companies like Estonia and Armenia with $1 billion valuations. I mean, it's nuts. That could have never happened 5 years ago even.
Absolutely.
Jeff, in your book, I think it's called Amplifying Value, right? Or Amplify Your Value.
Amplify Your Value.
Right? It focuses on creating a vision, developing strategies, executing them. This is a big question. We should probably read the book, but walk me through what it takes to create a vision and develop a strategy and to actually execute on it.
Wow.
So I don't have to read your 1,000-page book.
Well, it's not 1,000 pages, so you could knock it out in a few days.
Nice.
I tell you, the biggest lesson, in my opinion, that comes out of that book is you have to start with the company vision. What is the company trying to accomplish? And then you have to take this complex world of technology and put it in business terms. A great story that I relate in the book, and this will give you an idea of it. When I joined that commercial real estate company, the first thing that they wanted us to do was to build an IT strategy. So I did what every CIO loves to do when they need to build a strategy. I hired consultants, and they came in and they did a great job documenting our systems, and we had all this documentation, but we didn't have a story to tell, right? And so I was talking with one of our construction project managers, Matt Cashat. Shout out to Matt if he's listening. And I'm telling him this problem, and he said, well, the executive team makes these multi-million-dollar decisions every day. And when they do it, they always use what they call an investment memo, and it's very structured, the different pieces of it. So why don't you put your strategic plan in the format of an investment memo? It's like, oh man, it's like the sun broke through the clouds, and all of a sudden you have that epiphany, right? So Matt and I actually took all this data that the consultant did and created this investment memo because they've got comparables and benchmarks and all these things that you put into a good strategic plan. And we sat down and we told it and used the verbiage that you would use in construction of a new high-rise building. Right? A building has to be connected to the outside world. That's your internet. That's your power for your data center, blah, blah, blah. You have the core and shell of the building. Anyway, we won't go into all those details. But we told the IT story in that language. And when we got done, the CEO, Greg Gurnick, leans back in his chair and puts his hand behind his head and said, That's the first time I ever understood IT. Oh my God, what a winning moment, right? He understood what we were trying to do. And because when you're in something like commercial real estate, these are limited liability partnerships. So when you're asking them to spend money on IT, you're taking money literally out of their pockets, out of the partners' pockets. So we're asking for, I don't know, $30 million, whatever the price tag was back then, and that could be their new home in Florida,
Oh
or
yeah.
could be their next airplane, or whatever it is, right?
These poor
Um,
people, like,
yeah, 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 and they'll all kill me for
that's
talking like
okay.
that. But you have to show them the value and how that's going to bring it, but you got to do it in business terms. You can't talk about uptime and servers and
They don't
and
care.
all that. They don't care. What they care about is, how is this going to help us, in that case, build buildings more efficiently, build them better, of higher value, yada yada yada. And so we did that, and I think that's one of the major lessons from the book is, you got to stop thinking about IT and start thinking about the business that you're in.
Nice. Speaking of airplanes, I had a buddy that ran a company in Van Nuys, but he lived in further than Camarillo. And I said, "Do you commute every day?" He goes, "Yeah, it's no big deal." And I poked him a few times until he told me that, well, he takes his airplane, right, parks it in the Van
Uh-huh.
Nuys airport, and then skates to work. I was like, wow, what a dream.
Yeah, no kidding,
I
no
thought that
kidding.
was I thought that was really cool. I thought that was really cool. Chef, I know you're probably not an AI expert, but being technical and being a curious individual, I'm sure you've already looked into it. How do you see
Absolutely.
AI shaping the next 10 years of technology and IT and all that?
I think it's hard for us to sit here and imagine what 10 years is going to do. Look at, and AI has been around for a while, but what really happened was that when they released ChatGPT to the public, all of a sudden generative AI, large language models, just exploded, right? And the next generation was exponentially more powerful than the previous, and we're going to continue to see that. I think from a technology profession perspective, what you're going to see is more of a verticalization or specialization within technology. You're going to have software engineers that are also, maybe they're climate scientists and software engineers, or maybe they're in retail, but they're software engineers, right? So they're going to specialize, because AI is going to do the simple work of generating the code that you tell it to generate, but you have to be the part that thinks creatively about a solution to a problem. And the problem may not even exist yet. The problem may be 3, 5, 6, 7 years down the road. We as humans have to anticipate that, and anticipate that road ahead, and use AI as a tool to help us achieve that. I think that's kind of the future that I see for it.
Great. Thank you for that. Jeff, is there anything that I left out that, with 35 years of experience and all this knowledge that you could pass off to our listeners?
Well, I appreciate the 35 years of experience, because it's closing in on 45
Oh,
now.
Lord.
I'm getting old. I think we've hit the real gist of it. I think for those of your listeners that are technologists, that have this aspiration to maybe make that pivot into the leadership side of the house, focus on communication, collaboration, team building, design thinking, system thinking. I think those are all pieces that we are going to need. I think the other aspect that we haven't touched on is diversity within our teams, diversity of thought, diversity of experience, of background, because the problems that we are facing in our companies, in our personal lives, in our country, are so complex that we're going to need multiple points of view to solve those problems. And I think if you take anything away from our conversation today, it's that focus on those soft skills, and focus on bringing diversity of thought into your organization.
I love it. Thank you, Jeff. Thank you for sharing your incredible knowledge base, and I'm looking forward to being on your awesome podcast.
That's going to be fun. To the listeners, we're going to be recording that next. So be on the lookout for an episode of Status Go with Avetis.
Yes, love it. Love it. Jeff, thank you so much. I will see you very soon, and looking forward to connecting about other tech topics and leadership.
Awesome. Thanks
Take
for
care,
having me
Jeff.
on the show.
Thank you. And that brings us to the end of another great episode of the Tech Leaders Playbook. I want to thank you for joining us and hope you took away some valuable insights to apply in your professional journey. Don't forget to subscribe on your preferred podcast platform so you don't miss out on the next great conversation. I promise it'll be good. If you enjoyed today's episode, we'd appreciate if you could leave us a review. Your feedback not only helps us improve, but it also helps others discover the podcast. Better leaders mean better working environments. Better working environments leads to happier people. Remember, a rising tide lifts all boats. I'm Avetis Antaplyan, and this has been the Tech Leaders Playbook.